Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for a video which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. At least two. I'm having a little bit of fun going back and rearranging some of the content that I've made in the past into different things. I want to make a playlist of Emily Dickinson stuff, a playlist of Charles Bukowski stuff. It is possible that eventually I will have enough content on Langston Hughes to put this in a third playlist, but for now it will appear first off in the poetry discussions playlist here on the channel, but second it will also appear in a playlist that I am putting together on I'm doing 30 poetry discussions in 30 days for the National Poetry Month, to celebrate National Poetry Month, because I think this is something that should be done. A little bit more poetry should be spread online, and I think that poetry is one of the building blocks of the human literary experience that is all too often shunned in today's world. Speaking about discomfort with the world in which we live, I do have a poem from Langston Hughes which angst, I think. It has a deliberate dollop of angst on top of it. The poem is known as Monotony, and it reads as such. Today like yesterday, tomorrow like today. The drip, drip, drip of monotony is wearing my life away. Today like yesterday, tomorrow like today. Quaint little poem, very fast, very quick hitting, like a jab. Just a literary jab coming to us from Mr. Hughes. But I think that what is encapsulated here is a moment of change. It does not seem like a moment of change, but I think that that is exactly what we are getting. One cannot force change in their life until they recognize discomfort at the way their life is going. This monotony, I pulled up just real quick a couple definitions of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. According to the dictionary that Google cites, a hypothesis first advanced by Edward Sapir in 1929 and subsequently developed by Benjamin Whorf, that the structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of experience. Linguistic relativity is a definition right next to that. The hypothesis of linguistic relativity, also known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The Whorf hypothesis, or Whorfianism, is a principle suggesting the structure of a language affects its speaker's worldview or cognition, and thus people's perceptions are relative to their spoken language. Now, this is a little bit more of a broad topic than what I'm talking about right here. But what I'm talking about right here is, again, the diagnosis of discomfort in one's life. And without that diagnosis, actions cannot and will not be made towards changing it. I think that this is often portrayed as the midlife crisis, the monotony of life. Well, I better buy a sports car, right? I think that's a little bit different. I think that's a little bit different than what we've got going on here. The monotony of life, I think, is better encapsulated as the quarter life crisis. The day that someone wakes up in their mid-20s, early-ish 20s, maybe 30, and says, oh, well, this is the rest of life. The same thing I did yesterday, and the same thing I got to do tomorrow. That's the rest of it. That's all there is. That begins a quarter life crisis. Thus begins a quarter life crisis. I think that's what we're getting here with this poem. When we look at things, we understand that what we're getting is a moment of change because it's a moment of diagnosis. Without this diagnosis, without the ability to sit down and say, oh, well, this sort of sucks, the change will never be made, not consciously. We might accident our way into changing our lives, but it will never be a point of contention. It will always just be, well, I got fired, had to find a new job. Or somebody came into my work and recognized the work I was doing and wanted to give me a new job. But without that moment of monotony that says to us, hey, this sucks. And the only person that's going to change things in your life is you. Without that moment, we don't get here. Without that moment of, oh, no one's going to fix this for me, we don't move forward. But we have to recognize it first. And that's what we have here. Look, I believe in the death of the author. We don't have to understand anything about Langston Hughes' life in order to enjoy his poetry. We don't have to know anything about Langston Hughes' life in order to apply it, his poetry, to our own lives, to take those lessons with us that we wish to from his words. That said, Langston Hughes was certainly no couch potato. Langston Hughes was an innovator of the English language. Langston Hughes was an innovator of the written word. Langston Hughes was an innovator on some levels of film, cinematography. Langston Hughes was majestic, one might say, for so many different reasons, because of the tenor with which he announced himself. There is no apology in Langston Hughes' work. Langston Hughes is who he is, and you can take it or leave it, but it's not going to bother him. It is a special breed of this monotonous moment that leads someone to the realization that they want to be their own person. Without this realization, rarely is the individual forged. Why? Because there is enough going on in life. There are enough people telling you what to do in life that this moment will never occur to someone who does not have the wriggling of individuality in the back of their brain. What is an interesting idea to me is the Inception, right? The question of Inception. Can a poem like this spark in an individual this moment who otherwise might not have had it? I don't know. I think that some level of empathy is perhaps necessary in order to fully get any poem. That being said, to get this poem, the level of empathy needed is to say, yeah, I've had that moment where I've been bored with life. Otherwise, I don't know if something so simple as this really wedges itself under that appropriate place in your brain and cranks out that rock that says, oh, okay, now it's time to move. But I do think that a poem such as this can provide the slippery slope required for someone who is on the very verge of this type of realization. And I think that's why. So this poem is very short, but it is this type of poem, this tenor, I'll use the word again, of poem, that often means the most to people. And I think it's because poetry like this can awaken in someone. Not awaken. Awaken is not the right word. Poetry like this can shove the awakening individual off of the couch and into motion. Once that awakening is begun. Poems like this often mean the most to people. I think it is just a little bit unfortunate that this poem is so short. That there is nothing really catchy with this poem. If Langston Hughes had revved the engine on this poem and produced the type of literature that Langston Hughes was known to do. I mean, look at this. This is just as poetry. This is just as poetry. If Langston Hughes had really cranked this poem into gear and put more meat behind it, he really could have had something stunning. But it's a poem that does what it's supposed to do for those, I think, for whom it's supposed to do it. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. I hope to see you next time for something else. So I have here tomorrow, I will be doing Plath. So I have Langston Hughes on Mondays, Thursdays with Plath, Wednesdays with Bukowski, Thursdays with Emily Dickinson, Friday again with Bukowski, and Saturday with Frost. And then Sundays are sort of a mixed day. So yeah, I hope to see you back next time.